Welcome to the meeting of the Princeton Council, and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we are going to start with announcements. Mr. Liverman, did you have
Oh, yes, I just want to, just for the record, during our closed session meeting today, we had Mayor Lampert and Councilwoman Howard recused. We discussed the Fields versus Princeton University tax exemption lawsuit.
Okay.
So just for the record.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Howard, any announcements?
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to find the exact date. We have the upcoming flu clinic in town, so just a reminder that the flu can be deadly, especially for people who have vulnerable health systems. And so we have a free health clinic on next Tuesday, October 18th, from 1 to 6 p.m. at the Suzanne Patterson Center.
Okay. Mr. Liverman? Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Simon?
Yes, the improvements, and of course my notes are incomplete here, so I apologize. The improvements to the Woodfield Reserve have been completed, and there's an event this Saturday from 10 to noon. The entrance to the park is off Old Great Road. The public's invited to walk the 3/4 mile shorter Scout Loop or the longer 2.5 mile loop that visits Tent Rock and Council Rock. Additional details are available at Friends of Princeton Open Space, fopos.org.
Great, thank you. I have two quick announcements. The first is that October 18th is the last day to register to vote in order to be eligible to vote for the November election. And also the library is going to be hosting a series on racial literacy starting on October 18th, and there's information on the library's website, but there's a series of talks and films that might be of interest. And are there any staff announcements? It's like cricket. No? Okay. Oh, it's a cell phone. It sounds like an animal. It's some sort of insect. All right. Okay, and I'm not sure if anybody signed the sheet at the podium, but is there anybody who'd like to speak on any item that's not already on the agenda? Any members of the public for public comment tonight? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from June 13th, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any comments or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes passed. Next, we come to our presentations, and very pleased to welcome Ray Wadsworth to present to Council what's a really beautiful solution to the World Trade Center beam that Princeton received.
It's working, is it? Okay. I'd like to thank Council for letting me buy the fire truck that we sent to. I'm going to get off the subject. I'd like to thank Mayor and Council and Administrator for selling me the truck for $1 to go to Nicaragua. Those people over there love that truck, and it's in good hands. It took us a while to get it over there, but we finally got a C5 out of McGuire Air Force Base and got it over there. So I know that people over there would want to thank you too for it. I'll be going over there on October the 27th to make sure everything is working right, and George is going with me. So
Will you bring back some pictures? We want to see.
yes, we'll have pictures to bring back, and it's going to be nice to see how they got it. The first thing that I got a call about how the truck was gone, and they said the first thing they did, they pulled it in, and the first thing they oil changed it and greased it, made sure everything was working properly. So I want to thank you for letting something like that go where a country is really in need of a truck. If you've seen their trucks, you say, oh my goodness, this is a Cadillac. Anyway, I'm here tonight about the steel. I'd like to make first a little presentation of St. Paul's Church. It's a little community in itself. We have a rectory, we have a convent, we have a school, and a cemetery. We have a school board, we have a principal, and a vice principal. And we all work together. And we have a council, which was started back 9 years ago. And I'm on the council for the church with construction, which we've been going through, with building working on the school, working on the pre-K. If you'd ever want to see a beautiful classrooms, the pre-K, the little chairs and tables that they have there, the bathroom. I mean, it's unbelievable. And now we're working on the convent because the three Sisters of Mercy that was there, they retired. So there's no Sisters of Mercy coming in anymore. So we're making that all offices in there. And outside of the convent there is going to be like a prayer garden. And that prayer garden is about where I'm going to be talking about the steel to go. This steel will be there. The architects working with me after I went to Monsignor Rosie about the steel. I was asked about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to look about where to put this steel. And at that time, that we weren't really sure what we was going to do with the convent. Now with the architect, we're renovating that, making all new offices. It's going to be beautiful. And now we're going to have an architect for the landscaping. And he really wants, before anything goes, and it's going to have to be quick because they have everything done on the outside now. So I'm here tonight about the steel. I would like to make a presentation of that steel going at St. Paul's churchyard by the prayer garden, or where the architect thinks it's going to be. It can be seen from the street, Nassau Street, where people walk down Nassau Street. Any religion, anyone can come in there, sit down, meditate at the prayer garden. If you come up there and seen the 3,000 flags that we put out for 9/11, I mean, we had so many people stop by and see it. And so that'll be, we put them away for 5 years from now to put them back out. So, but every name was on there. So tonight I'm presenting here about the steel for council. Okay?
Thank you. And I want to thank St. Paul's for all you do for the community, and especially for finding what I think is the perfect home for the beams. So I want to thank you for stepping forward and offering to build a proper memorial for it. And we do have a resolution on the agenda to authorize the display of the World Trade Center beam at St. Paul's. So is there a motion to approve Resolution 16282?
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Butler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. When it's done,
Let us know.
everyone will be welcome up there. Will be a ribbon cutting and everything for it.
Ray, I just want to reiterate, you did a beautiful job. The church did a beautiful job on that 9/11 display. It was really exquisite and well done, and I think it was well appreciated in the community. So we know it's in good, we know the steel's in good hands. Thank you.
There's only one thing else. As if anyone has any questions, please do not call the church, because Monsignor Rosie has so much on his plate now. I mean, between masses and with the construction going on, and if anybody has any questions, please call me, because I'm right next door to him, and we talk every day, so I know when to call that rectory, okay?
What's your
Thank you
office-
so
what-
much, and thank you for letting us do it.
What's your office telephone number, Ray, in case somebody wants to call you?
609-921-6937.
You're a brave man, Ray.
You are. 5 million people just took that number down.
Thank you. All right, thank you so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Gee, it's just the same as my number.
All right, and now we're going to switch gears and invite up David Goldfarb to talk to us about the Stony Brook Regional Sewage Authority.
Thank you. Before I begin my presentation, I would say that I'm happy to have St. Paul's as my neighbor, and in fact, the house I live in was once the rectory at St. Paul's and was moved down Charlton Street during the first decade of the 20th century. And of course, I'm reminded that I'm a neighbor of St. Paul's every day at 8, 12, and 6, but it's really not much of a problem. So I'm here tonight to talk about Stony Brook. For those who may be watching at home and are not familiar, Stony Brook treats
Wait,
all
David,
of
would you be more
Mic on,
comfortable?
just get close.
No, why don't you, would you
Sit there. You can sit there.
sit,
on.
no, sit and use one of those table mics. It might be better for you. Don't you think they work a little better? See if that helps.
So, to those who may be watching at home and are not familiar, Stony Brook treats all of Princeton's sewage. The sewage is collected by a municipal agency, the Princeton Sewer Operating Committee, and is delivered to Stony Brook to be treated. And in addition to Princeton's sewage, Stony Brook also treats sewage from West Windsor, South Brunswick, Plainsboro, the Hopewell Valley, West Windsor, if I didn't mention it. It's a regional agency that was created in the 1970s, and Princeton, at the time, was the largest user by far, and over time, the other users have started to catch up. If you're watching in the agenda, or I don't know if we can get it up on the screen, but you can see the financial results of Stony Brook starting back in 1990 up to the present, and there are a few trends that I'd like to point out. One is, of course, if you look at the squares, the second from the top, the charges to the participants, including Princeton, have been remarkably stable over the last decade. But if you look down near the bottom, second from the bottom, you can see that the revenue that has come from sludge incineration at the River Road plant has declined over time, and although it's still profitable and contributes significantly to our budget, there are some concerns with the ongoing viability of sludge incineration, including environmental concerns, meaning that it's very tightly regulated and we comply with all of the regulations, but it's entirely conceivable that the regulations could become so onerous that it would no longer make sense for us to continue in the incineration business. Also, it's obviously very energy intensive. Energy prices, as you know, have been relatively low recently. If energy prices increase significantly, that could also make incineration no longer viable. And if the profits from incineration are no longer available in our budget, that means that the charges to participants are going to have to increase. If we move along to the next slide, this is my favorite slide, and I think I've shared it with you before. this shows the flows to the River Road plant, which come from Princeton and from South Brunswick and West Windsor, and the parts of Plainsboro that are served through South Brunswick. There are a couple of very significant pieces of data that are shown in this. One is, if you look at Princeton, if you start at the left, it appears at the top. That's Princeton's flow. And over time, you can see that Princeton's flow has decreased significantly. It's decreased significantly despite the trends in Princeton. Obviously, between 1995 and the present, we have added a lot of new customers. Princeton University alone has grown enormously during those 21 years. But what we have achieved through I&I reduction, tightening up our system, has reduced the overall flow significantly. And if you look at the line below Princeton's, which is the South Brunswick flow, Princeton and South Brunswick had moved pretty much in parallel until Princeton started its intensive I&I removal program, and we are now significantly below South Brunswick. And frankly, I think during those 21 years, the parts of South Brunswick that are treated by SBRSA did not grow relative to Princeton. I think Princeton grew relative to South Brunswick, mostly because of development at the university. This is significant because Stony Brook allocates all of its costs to participants based on flow. So the smaller Princeton share is of the total flow, the less Princeton pays. I would also like to point out another significant piece of data, which is the rainfall, which is, if you look at the lower right, it's that jagged blue line. The rainfall currently, this is this is a moving 12-month average. The rainfall is about as low as it's ever been during the time that we've been measuring it. And obviously, there's a very strong correlation between rainfall and flow, particularly in systems that are still somewhat leaky, like Princeton's. So the fact is that even though Princeton, the trend is significantly negative, and that's because we've tightened the system, it's somewhat exaggerated because we are currently at a very low rainfall period. And as rainfall returns to normal, which one would probably expect it to do over time, Princeton's flow is likely to increase, meaning that we're going to pay a larger proportion of Stony Brook's total costs. If you move to the next slide, or next page in your agenda, it shows how Stony Brook's budget is made up. And unlike almost every other government agency, salaries and benefits are actually not the largest expense at Stony Brook. The largest categories, it's the single largest category, but it's not over 50%. The large categories include energy, obviously, both for the incinerator and for the treatment process, and also capital expenses, including construction costs and debt service. The plant is 35 years old. It is approaching the end of its useful life, even though it's been maintained over time. There are large capital investments that are required, including a very expensive expansion in Pennington, and also one to follow in Hopewell. So these capital costs are obviously going to have to be passed along to customers, including Princeton, even though we don't benefit directly. It's all the costs of the entire budget are shared pro rata based on flow among the participants, and therefore we're going to pay our share of the construction costs for those plants, and also the other capital costs, just because the system is getting older. So that's another cause of concern with respect to our ability to keep the participant charges level as they have been over the past 10 years. If you look at the next slide, or the next page in your agenda, what you can see is that Princeton, over the past 11 years or 12 years, has saved a significant amount of money because of the investment that we've made in reducing I&I. And that's the one thing that is directly in Princeton's control that allows us to see some potential for reducing costs in the future. Princeton still has a very leaky system. All you need to do is go back to the rainfall chart, and you can see that there's a significant correlation between rainfall and Princeton's flow. Our collection system in Princeton is still old. There are large portions of the system that need to be replaced just because they're old, and there are also large portions of the system that should be replaced because they're leaky, and if you replace a leaky system with a tight system, you reduce the extraneous flow into the system and reduce the charges here in Princeton. The fact is that we are not even keeping up with replacing the system based on its age. I know that sewers are not the first thing that people think about when they're thinking about capital expenses. It's that nobody's going to come up to you and thank you for replacing a sewer. But it is a piece of our infrastructure. It needs to be maintained like the rest of our infrastructure. And to the extent that we can reduce extraneous flow, there is a return on our investment. So I know that it's not easy to allocate additional funds in any capital category, but I urge you to look carefully at the age of the system, the condition of the system, and the plan for maintaining it over long periods of time, and put an emphasis on trying to identify the places where the extraneous flow is coming in and tightening up those particular parts, because to the extent that that's done, there's an immediate payback and a continuing payback over time. The only other thing that I want to make you aware of with respect to Stony Brook is that there is an agreement among the 6 participant municipalities that governs how Stony Brook charges the participants for its services. That agreement included what was known as a debt service adjustment that was in lieu of a connection fee, and that over time returned a great deal of money to Princeton, because Princeton, as one of the early contributors, spent money when it had a large pro rata share, and that money was returned as other participants came in and started reducing Princeton's pro rata share. That debt service adjustment has expired under its own terms. There are still some minor rounding adjustments that will continue over the next several years, but the expiration of that debt service adjustment was at the end of last November of 2015. And there's currently no system in place for new connections to be charged. In other words, even though Princeton charges a connection fee and includes the capital cost that Princeton has paid at Stony Brook, if there's a new connection in South Brunswick, Princeton does not have a mechanism for recovering the investment that Princeton has made in Stony Brook, so that the new connection in South Brunswick repays Princeton for its investment. This is unfair, and it can only be remedied by unanimous agreement among the 6 municipalities. That's the way the participant agreement is set up. Obviously, there are going to be winners and losers in it's a zero sum. Connection fees are paid by the expanding municipalities and are collected by the municipalities that are not expanding. But it is something that I think deserves some attention. I think the only mechanism for trying to address it is by bringing it to the attention of all of the municipalities and trying to get some consensus on some sort of connection fee or other replacement. That's not going to be an easy process. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be started, and Mayor, if you'd like, I can sit down with you and we can talk about how that might happen. Because to the extent that Princeton does reduce its flow, and to the extent that other municipalities expand relative to Princeton, both of which are entirely possible, Princeton will be cheated over the succeeding years by not having a mechanism in place to recover our investment. So that's currently the state of Stony Brook. I would say it's been a great fiscal success from Princeton's point of view for a decade, and I think it's unlikely that that pattern of very, very low increases is going to continue over an extended period of time because of additional capital costs and because of rainfall trends, and mostly those two things. So I think you should be prepared for somewhat higher charges at Stony Brook and should carefully consider significantly larger investments in repairing our leaky sewer system.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Well, I know that at our next meeting, we're going to be talking about our capital plan, and so I would encourage us to take your comments into light when we talk about that. And I want to thank you, too, for I know that sewers have been a passion of yours for a decade or more, and that you should be given a lot of the credit for the progress we've made. So
Well,
I want to
appreciate
thank
that.
you for
And they really are, the sewers are literally the most rewarding part of my history of public service, only because I absolutely know that if it weren't for me, these things wouldn't be done. You could ignore trees and somebody else would pay attention. You could ignore roads and somebody else would pay attention. I feel if I ignored sewers, nobody else would be paying attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
David, before you leave, I'd like to thank you for your foresight about 6 or 7 years ago when you were on Borough Council and I was on Township Committee, and you and others on Borough Council agreed to share the cost, the getting in cost, to start the work on the solar plant. And you should know at this point that we are 2 approvals away from being able to put a spade in the ground. One of those approvals that we're lacking is from the Canal Commission, and they apparently have some concerns about runoff that have to be answered, and will be answered. And the other is from the county, and they have some concerns about runoff also. Basically, we've tried to assure them that the site is capped. Nothing that we're going to do there will change that. There's 2 feet of fill above the cap. Nothing is going to change that. We're putting the solar panels on top of the fill, and they will not add or diminish the runoff from the capped site. So with a little luck and maybe a little urging, we'll get the last 2 approvals and work will commence on the solar facility.
Well,
So thank you for your help all those years ago that got the project started.
Well, whatever role I had at the time was extremely minor, and it's very fortuitous that we have a large electricity user, the Stony Brook treatment plant on River Road, directly adjacent to an empty space that it doesn't have any other purpose. This is the ideal situation for solar generation, and it will significantly reduce Stony Brook's electricity costs, and those savings will be passed along. I'll say this, and it's entirely understandable that the Canal Commission may not be a big fan of Princeton at the moment because of what happened on the battlefield, and so any feather smoothing that can take place might be productive, because I think they're inclined to be to delay approvals just because of their experience on the battlefield. Thank you.
Hey, David, I have when you presented to CFAC, you talked about some ways in which we could actually test where our system might be leaking, and you talked about the fact that when we do our sewer work, it's typically tied to our roads, but that, and so we sort of have prioritized the sewer work based on the condition of the roads, but in fact that may or may not be getting at our most leaky parts of our system, and that we could reduce our inflow, outflow, whatever, to Stony Brook more if we made That wouldn't be a capital investment, but it was, you were talking about maybe $50,000 worth of work to identify those areas?
Well, yes, absolutely. And in addition to being Princeton's representative at Stony Brook, I'm also the chair of the Princeton Sewer Operating Committee, and we are focusing on this issue with Bob Huff. We need to take a scientific approach to identify the areas that are leakiest in our system and focus our efforts on repairing those systems, because that's, when we repair where the system is leakiest, we get the biggest return on our investment. I think Bob is receptive. Either, we could do this either by having municipal employees do it or by having a contractor do it, or a consultant. It's just a question of metering, putting meters in the system and finding where the flows increase and then tracking it back to the source. It's not difficult. It takes some diligence and time and effort, but it's not a technology that it's very advanced. It's just a question of putting meters and cameras, which we can do within our pipes, and finding where the leaks are.
But is there anything we can do to be supportive of that effort? Because it seems like it would make a lot of sense.
We meet with Bob. When we meet with Bob's sympathetic to us. At some point, Bob meets with Mark, and then Mark meets with you, and I'm not exactly sure what happens between when we meet with Bob and when Mark meets with you. So, yes, if you want those kinds of things to happen, you know who to talk with.
We do, I think, want those things to happen. So I would like to see it happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move on to reports, and we have two finance reports from Mark DeShield.
Thank you, Mayor. I will start with my first report, which is concerning municipal fee and service charge, a new policy. This is an outgrowth of development of our 5-year forecast. And one of the things that we realized in putting together a 5-year forecast, and that's a need for the review on a regular basis and a consistent basis of our fees and charges. So basically what I'm presenting to council is a policy that deals with that issue. That policy indicates that each department will evaluate their current fees, charges, permits on an annual basis, and this to become part of the budget process by December 31st of each year. Each department will evaluate their fees and then make a recommendation along with their budget submission to the council on the fees to either, one, the fees remain the same, or any recommended changes to the fees. In doing that process, what we try to look at is the best ways and kind of give some framework for developing that policies. One, we want to make sure that it's done on a regular basis. Two, all these fees will, when they're presented to you, will be benchmarked against other fees and charges to comparable neighboring jurisdictions. The next thing that would happen is that we want to make sure and an evaluation is done to determine whether those fees and charges complement the municipality's policies and long-range policies. For example, if we are promoting certain policies or goals of the township, that those fees actually reflect or promote those goals or policies. So what we will do for the first time this year is provide you with those recommendations. And the final piece is really to take a look at when they are services that are provided on a community-wide basis versus it being a public benefit, but more of when it's a private benefit versus a community-wide benefit, that we look at those fees very closely in determining, in that case, we should ensure that we recover, if not all, most of the fees associated with the cost for that services. So that's what will be provided to council on a daily basis. This will be done for the current fund, and also the sewer and parking utilities. In those cases, we will recover the full cost of the services provided. So that's the one, and you will see that as part of the budget process this year. Next thing I wanted to do is give you an update on...
Mr. Eschel,
Mr. Simon?
one request on that topic. You've got this spreadsheet right now which has all of the fees by topic.
Yes.
When you actually do the exercise, if you can also include their annual contribution to the budget, it would be
Yes.
helpful. Right? I mean, it's hard to know how to, size these and prioritize these when we're looking at them in its current form.
Right. When you receive those, you will get that full analysis. Just wanted to give you an idea of what are the different fees and charges that we're referring to.
Ms. Butler, did you have a comment too?
Well, on some of these fees, Mark, when you talk about the goals of the community or the goals of the town, some of these things may be in conflict, but aren't we limited by what we can charge, what fees we can set? I mean, they're not supposed to be revenue generating, are they? I thought they couldn't be we don't want to lose money on them, but we can't use them as a source of, like a profit center either.
Really, what you have to do is, for example, one of the things you want to look at a fee, if you're providing a service where you want to promote this service to the larger population, it may be more important that you actually get people to, for example, a permit. You want them to, and I'll use a smoke detector. It may be more important to encourage people to abide by that versus generating or recovering the fees for that.
Okay.
That's really what we're looking for in the equity issue. Next thing we want to talk about is one of the goals that Council identified in 2016 was the preparation of a 5-year financial forecast, and we've been working to review the revenues and expenditures. What we did was take a look back to 2012 and develop a preliminary forecast. And at this time, what I'm going to be providing Council is just an update. The Finance Committee wants to take a look at that, and there's been some suggestions of additional ways to kind of take a look at this analysis, so I will share the full analysis when we get to that point, but I think it's important that we begin to start thinking about the budget process and the 5-year plan, so I wanted to give you an idea of where we are and give you some ideas of some of the trends that I've seen so far. So what we did, we took a look at the current fund revenues and expenditures and made a forecast. And the other thing that's important to note, what we're attempting to do here in developing this 5-year financial forecast is really to develop a planning tool. We're not trying to predict it's in the packet.
It's in the packet online. Well, it is, for viewers, it is in the packet online. If you go online to the agenda, it's in the publicly available packet.
I'm just going to get back to my place. It's important to note the purpose of the 5-year forecast is just to be a planning tool, and it's really to show us the future trends so that we can develop strategies to deal with those future trends. Versus, it's important, I don't want people to understand, this is not to predict what's actually going to happen. It's really as a tool that we use on an annual basis to help us develop strategies moving forward. So that's an important note. The first step in developing this forecast, we took a look at all the prior years' expenditures and revenues, and one of the limiting factors in developing this plan this cycle is there is limited consolidated history on the revenues and expenditures because of consolidation, so it's very difficult in order to kind of predict using those data and using forecasting tools to really predict the future. So a lot of what we've done here is really looked at those the forecast and used our best judgment to determine the forecast moving forward. That being the case, and what I will share with you this evening, and again, as I said before, we want to review that full plan with the Finance Subcommittee before, and I will present the whole plan to everyone. What I wanted to give people is really a outlook for 2017 and what are the major pressures both from expenditures and the downward pressures for revenue. And if we look at those, here's the trends that we're going to see in 2017. One, health insurance which is always a pressure in terms of increasing our expenditures. The other one, which is going to be significant, is the capital improvement fund. Over the last 2 years, we've reduced our capital improvement fund in the budget because we had reserves in our reserves that would cover these costs, and the capital improvement fund is our down payments required for the capital expenditures that we do on an annual basis. That is going to go up significantly this year because our revenues have been depleted. The next issue that's always pushing in our budget is both PFRS and PERS, which is the pension funds, and again, we expect those to, and again, be a large portion of the increases in our budget. At the same time as looking at these, we expect those at roughly around an $830,000 increases in just those areas. At the same time that is happening, we do see downward pressures on our revenues, and we spoke about this at the last year at budget time. There are the reserves for debt service. That reserve is depleting. Over the next 2 years, that reserve will go from $1.4 million to zero. We're going to take a $750,000 hit this year in that reserve, and next year that reserve goes away completely. And then the final piece is under the assessment trust. That revenues are also going down this year. So we will see both revenue pushes on our revenues and decreases in revenues this year, and the revenue portion is going to be about $1.1 million. That being said, it's going to be important as we look forward into this budget that we begin early in preparing the budget and looking on the revenue side. Some of the areas that I think that we need to concentrate on is on the revenue side, the use of our surplus, how we deal with using surplus to help mitigate these pressures that we see. Two, looking at the increased use of utility surplus in particular, we may want to look at in terms of the parking utility and using surpluses from the parking utility. And then also, as we talked about earlier, is really evaluating other sources of revenues within the budget. And on the expenditure side, as always, really managing our health care costs. We've started that process earlier this year, and I've reviewed with the Personnel Committee, looking at the possibilities of what savings we can occur. We'll continue to manage that piece. The other thing, as usual, managing all of our other expenses throughout the budget. And finally, I think one of the big pieces we really need to look at, and we'll be talking about that more at the next meeting, which is the capital plan and the impacts of the capital plan. As I said before, the capital improvement fund will be one of the main pressures on our budget this year. But that doesn't account for if we want to look at the capital fund and if there's additional expenditures that we're looking at in the future. Finally, what I wanted to talk to councils about at our next meeting, I will be presenting to council the budget schedule for 2017, which we're going to try to get a head start on that process, and we'll go through that process at the next meeting. We have a finance committee. Hopefully we can get that finalized and set up so we'll be reviewing both the 5-year plan, which I will present to council, plus going over the budget schedule for 2017.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mark? Okay. All right, well, to be continued at the next meeting then.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call up Sandy Webb to go over the best practices inventory. This is something we do every year. It's a checklist from the state.
Thank you. It's funny, I actually went back and looked. We've actually been doing this for 6 years. In 2010 was the first year that the best practices inventory was issued by the governor's office, and there were 80 questions on it. It was extremely time-consuming. So I'm really glad to talk tonight about the best practices. They've reduced the number from what after the first year was 80 down to 50, and now they've reduced it even further to 30 questions. But I think they've hit on a lot of the good topics that I think are important, certainly important to me as the CFO, and I think to all of you in the Finance Committee and the CFAC Committee as well. The best practices inventory talks about general management, finance and auditing, procurement, budget preparation and presentation, health insurance, and personnel. And what they try to do in the questions that they've asked are to promote for us as a municipality financial accountability, sound management, and transparency. And they've been the three things that they've been looking at as they've developed this inventory since its inception back in 2010. So the way the inventory works is it's based on your yes, no, or not applicable answers. Every time you answer no, you're only allowed to miss or to get so many no answers before you're subject to lose a portion of the final payment of your state aid. And since its inception, both in the former township and the former borough, and now as our consolidated Princeton, we've always received all of our aid. So I think in terms of the questions that they asked, I think we're doing pretty well. So generally, when I go through this, I'll entertain any questions that you have, but I like to just go over the ones where we are answering no to, where we would be subject to lose aid if that happened to come about. So the first question, and I know this will be no surprise to council, is question number 21, and it asks whether we introduced our budget and adopted our budget on time. And we introduced on time, and we were set to adopt, I think, at the public hearing, but then we decided to make some changes, and we couldn't make all the changes that night. We postponed it for, I think, another 2 weeks. So unfortunately, now we have to answer no to this question. But hopefully next year we'll get back on target and, get that answered back up to yes again. And the other question actually Mark brought to my attention today is question number 29. It talks about the collective bargaining union agreements and whether we've refrained from allowing them to have longevity payments based on their years of service. And we've eliminated it from non-contractual, from AFSCME, from dispatch. The only contract it remains in is still PBA. However, in the PBA contract, not even this new contract, their contract before limited longevity award payments for anybody hired after 1/1/13. So I went back, and we're going to now answer this question as a yes, because we do have a limit in place that, after a certain date, they will no longer be eligible for the longevity payments. So I'm really glad to be before you tonight and say that out of a possible 30 answer questionnaire, we have 29 that we're affirmative on. So our percentage score is 97%. So I think we're doing a great job, and, it's to all of you as well as the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Yeah, how many municipalities, I guess, participate in best practices, and then how many scores are this high?
I think there's some that are high, but it's interesting because in the local finance notice that they issue, they really have no way of tracking the answers, but they say that we are subject to audit. So if you're not telling the whole truth in this, they can start to pull licenses back. So certainly, for us, I know that we've answered everything accurately, and every town is required to do this.
Okay.
I think that some do rank as high as we do, but I know that there are some that struggle with some of these, especially some of the smaller communities that don't have the resources that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy, I have a quick question. This is consistent with what our professional auditor has said about our the way we handle our finances, but the issue of procurement, that has been an issue, and we've had our auditor in, and is that captured, the issue that we've had, that he mentioned, that he's brought to our attention, is that mentioned in here, or?
The best practices doesn't ask specific enough to address the issues when the auditor was here. But I think that internally, we've made a lot of strides in the way we're handling things for procurement. So I feel a lot better now than I did a couple of years ago when we had a couple repeat comments in our audit report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Howard, do you have any reports?
Just that, I guess with the cold weather today, it reminds us that the holidays are not too far away, and the Human Services Department has released the request for people to participate in the holiday gift drive. So you'll hear that from me from now. I know. It seems early, but I think maybe it was timed at the cold weather. So people can go on the Human Services Department website. Last year, over 100 kids in need applied, and members of the community were very, very generous in giving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Miller?
We had a kickoff meeting today for the solar array on top deck of the Spring Street garage with representatives from the library, who will be the client for the power generated from the solar array, and with our consultants who will be working with us on developing the request for procurement and helping us with the evaluation of the results that we receive when we get our proposals back. As you all recall, the plan is that we will take a preliminary look at the viability of the project when we receive the proposals, and then come back to council for a go, no-go decision on proceeding with the project. At this point, it looks as if perhaps the first quarter of next year, 2017, we will be looking at proposals and coming back to council, making a recommendation to you on go, no-go for the project.
Yeah, I'd like to report, I sent out something to most council people in regard to the Unity Walk that we had on Saturday. We left here, the municipal building, at 11 o'clock, roughly 65 people, and we walked up, and Brett Bonfield from the library joined us, and Tim Quinn, they were there. It was a beautiful time. We walked up to the Nassau Hall University and then came back to the library, and we had 3 panel discussions. One was a mayoral panel that our own mayor, Liz Lampert, served on, and then we had a professional panel and a youth panel. And I would like to say it was a very nice experience. One, to see the diversity in the community, and 2, to be part of a community that respects and appreciates diversity. So I really, really enjoyed it. And Tatiana Sims, along with the library and Corner House and our police department and some other folks, did a great job in organizing it. So just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Ms. Butler?
Thank you. Heather may be talking about the holidays, but I'm still talking about the pool. We've spent about the last 6 weeks going through a process of elimination. I think I mentioned it maybe in the spring that we thought we had a possible leak in the dive well, and then thought we had it fixed over the summer until we were looking at the water bills. And in fact, there does seem to be a problem, and it's going to be somewhat significant, but I think it will be, the Rec Commission will absorb the cost, but it does mean that we're going to be taking out some cement blocks near the dive well, and it appears there's a line down there that may be leaking or something. So we're continuing to work on that. And also, so the pool complex is not closed up, although they've been working full-time, 2 or 3 staffers, since Labor Day to winterize the facility. It's a slow process. I also want to mention that the Mary Moss Subcommittee met with Leighton and Shirley. We had a really good meeting last week, I guess it was. Was that last week? To start talking about some signage and whatnot, commemoration of Mary Moss in the park. And I think we had, everybody left there very enthusiastic about the possibilities. And the Mary Moss Subcommittee will be going to the HBC on the 19th of October, 17th, for a no obligations review from them, and I think we've put out a few things that we hope they can be helpful. And otherwise, the recreation fall and winter activities brochure is online, and people should sign up now.
Thank you, Ms. Simon. I just have a couple reports. The first is almost 2 weeks ago, we had the kickoff meeting for the Neighborhood Character and Zoning Initiative. I think most members of council were there, but that initiative is underway, and the next step will be putting together some more focused meetings with groups of local architects, meeting with our relevant boards and commissions, and also meeting with residents. So keep your ear out for those meetings. Also, we launched with the Greater Mercer TMA, a Safe Streets program. The kickoff was at the farmers market last week, and you'll see signs around town. We have a lot of local shops participating, and it's an education campaign aimed at drivers, pedestrian, bicyclists, pretty much everybody who is on the roads, crossing the roads, walking on the roads, to just be mindful of speed limits, use the crosswalks, take your eyes up off your cell phones and look at where you're going, so everybody can be safer. And the police are helping with that too, and if you'll probably see police, they're walking Nassau Street and other areas downtown to help with the education campaign. And then finally, at Marquand Park, they've unveiled just a really sweet little library. These are popping up all over town, but the one at Marquand is really special. It was built inside of the old stump that is on the entrance right out of the parking lot, and it's gorgeous. And the library is helping to keep it stocked with donations they receive of excess children's books. And I especially recommend checking it out if you have a small child who can fit inside of it. I think the rest of us are too big, but I just want to thank the Marquand Park Foundation and Bob Wells, who had the vision for it. It's a really wonderful addition to town. And are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton?
Good evening. Snowden Lane Sanitary Sewer is progressing. On Wednesday, our contractor will be working at the intersection of Snowden and Van Dyke to install a manhole that was scheduled to accommodate the day off of school. And then he'll be looking to proceed up north on Snowden. Work is progressing pretty well. The water company has been delayed in finishing up the last of the water connections to the private properties, but they will be back shortly to do that. Our other contractor, S. Brothers, will be working on Pardo Road and North Road this week. North Road was in need of repair, and we had some contingency left in our project, so we were able to allocate funds to do a short repair of North Road that exceeded the abilities of what Public Works could do to stabilize it for the winter. We had good news that the governor will be signing the gas tax, and the way that I understand the wording of the timing.
It's sort of good from a transportation perspective.
Yes, that's true. It's good in terms of getting our money on grants. But the way that I understand the wording is that it will either go into effect November 1st or 2 weeks from when the governor signs, whichever is later. So we've been looking at different contingency plans with Valley Road. I know we had talked about just waiting until next year, but we are also looking at a contingency plan of milling and putting the base layer of asphalt in on the roadway before December, and then holding off until the spring to do the top course. So that's one contingency plan that we may put into effect depending on when the legislation actually goes into effect. We also are putting out a parking RFP, request for proposals, this week. Will be advertised in the papers. This is related to our federal grant that we got through the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and we'll expect to get proposals back from interested firms at the beginning of November. So we would look to evaluate those, negotiate for the contract, and hopefully be to council early December with that to award.
Terrific, thank you. Any other staff reports? Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm sorry. We did have a Councilwoman Cornwell is not here, but we did have a wrap-up, community wrap-up meeting with various members of the business community and our council in regard to the pros and cons of this community university that we had. And we'll be bringing back some ideas to you in regard to financing. As you know, Ms. Cornwell brought up the notion that the municipality had to pay so many dollars in order to fund community university. So we're trying to find a way to alleviate some of the financial burden on the municipality. So we did meet and discuss that. I forgot to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we can move on to our work session this evening, and I just want to explain how the agenda is put together, because it's a little bit confusing. We have two proposals for an ordinance to deal with the emerald ash borer and how we want to treat ash trees as an exception in the tree removal ordinance we recently passed. And we have them listed both as part of the work session, and then we again have them both listed under ordinance introductions. And the intention is during the work session for council to basically come to some understanding of which of these we will introduce. The intention is not to introduce both of them. So we'll have the discussion first, but in order to give us the flexibility, we don't know ahead of time which one we'll be introducing. We've listed them both, but we can just not take action on one of them and only take action on the one we actually plan to introduce and have the public hearing on later on. Hopefully that was more clear than confusing. We have had extensive discussion on this already by the Shade Tree Commission. I know you guys have been discussing this for many, many months, if not years. And we've had extensive discussion on council, but I did want to have some time tonight for Councilman Simon to explain his proposal, and then for the Shade Tree Commission to explain their proposal, and then we can have a discussion on council to see where we are, and then move on from there. So, Mr. Simon, as part of this work session, did you want to...
Well, and I actually don't particularly care who goes first, so if the Shade Tree Commission wants to go first, since it's a shade tree ordinance we're talking about, I'm happy to cede the floor. If you'd rather that I go first, it's fine. I don't really care. Would you prefer to go first, or would you prefer that I talk first and then you guys talk? It doesn't matter to me. It's a work session, so frankly, we're considering it all together.
Yes.
All right. So the first version, which has my name attached to it, is a very simple exclusion, and basically says that we're making an exception as a requirement for getting a permit from any replacement costs for ash trees, because at least as of the information we saw before this meeting, 100% of untreated ash trees would be killed by the emerald ash borer. It's the most virulent pest that we've seen with respect to trees, and it's expected to be expensive both for the town in terms of our municipal costs and also for individual residents in terms of costs on their property to begin with. And my thinking in proposing the simple direct exception is this is going to be a financial burden. It's also going to, frankly, fall unevenly on people. Some people are going to be hit pretty hard by it. And I think the town should be doing everything we can to mitigate that financial burden and not take any steps that would make it any worse. So that's the thinking behind it, and it's really pretty much that simple.
So just to make sure I understand, so all it does is it says you're exempt from the fee if you want to take down an ash borer.
From the fee and the permit, the first version, right? Yes. So, and it's legally clear, right? I mean, there's no complexity to it. There's no
complexity at all. It's very clear that it's an exception to the permitting requirement and the fees and the replacement requirement.
The question I have, can anyone take down an ash tree without any notification to our arborists? Or should is there a notification?
In the version that's listed under my name, there's no notification required. in the version that's coming from the Shade Tree Commission, there is a permit requirement and there's also a replacement requirement. The fee is waived on the permit, right? And am I getting that
Let's
right?
let them do
I'll let them
the,
explain it. But okay, so in the first version, I'll speak to the version 1, all right? Let them explain version 2. In version 1, it's just a complete exception. It's the same as if a tree had already died and fallen. That we already have exactly that same exception in the law for that case. And the thinking behind it is it's going to be, unless trees are treated, they're going to die, right? And it basically gives people the flexibility, if they're able to take them down when they're still alive, to do so without penalty. Frankly, it's safer, and there are certainly any number of situations under which it'll be more cost-effective for people. If they're having tree work done, they can do it all. They don't have to wait or incur an additional cost.
okay, thank you. All right, and then I think we'll hear from the Shade Tree, from Janet and from Lorraine on the other alternative, and then we can have a little discussion on where we want to go.
Right. Well, we submitted this to council along with a rationale behind it so that we could explain our thinking. Actually, we're not requiring a replacement. We're just suggesting that perhaps that there be a goal of a replacement, a 10% replacement of the number of ash trees taken down. We're not requiring it. We're suggesting that because of the tree canopy, because of aesthetic considerations, because of environmental considerations, we have to keep the canopy going. And we're just hoping that people who do take their ash trees down, which they should do in a proactive manner, along with treating some that are in excellent shape, that's what we're hoping, that if they take them down, they will also think about replacing 10% of them with a minimum of, a suggested goal of a minimum of 1. And that's really because, the Shade Tree Commission our purpose is to promote to keep the canopy going. And to take all the ash trees down, perhaps residents won't understand what the benefits are of treating some. And if you take all the ash trees down, we know now from, especially the New Jersey Department of Agriculture has said that the emerald ash borer may fly even further to find more ash trees. So it's really not a good idea to take them all down. We're hoping people would do it in a staged removal, but we are not requiring replacement or payment into the tree fund. We're not requiring it, we're suggesting.
So could you walk me through then, let's say I have let's say I have like 5 ash trees. So under your proposal then, I would contact the arborist, and then how would it work?
What we would like to have, and please jump in, Elaine, if I'm wrong, but we would like to have the applicant, the landowner, still fill out the permit application, waive the fee, absolutely waive the fee, but the permit application helps us in at least 2 ways. One is it informs the arborist who is taking these down, because we will have neighbors calling in and saying, my next door neighbor is taking down all their trees. She can then easily check to see whether in fact that was a property for which she had been notified that there were ash trees to be taken down. Is that?
Yeah, that's true, because neighbors often call and say if someone is going to take down 25 ash trees in their yard, part of that permitting process is that they're supposed to notify their adjacent neighbors, so the neighbors are informed, so that if someone has something they're concerned about, and by them telling us how many, I will go to visit, I have a lot of requests already for ash trees coming down, and sometimes they're misidentified. People they want to take down elm trees, they think it's an ash tree, or Norway maple, they think it's an ash tree. So, you don't want to just kind of have this broad brush exemption. You need to have a little bit of regimentation to how you go about doing it. We're going to say yes, we're going to allow people to do it, but we just want to be sure we know what they're doing. And the idea is that on some properties where people will want to cut down every ash tree, there will be nothing left in those yards. And that greatly impacts the neighbors, it greatly impacts the streetscape, it impacts all the little environment of that neighborhood. So the idea of the goal of replacing 10% of the total number of ash trees on the property is not that overwhelming.
The other reason, I'll just read this quickly because it's better the way we stated it. We would require the application, it helps ensure that the landowner is familiar with local, state, and federal requirements for safe removal and disposal of ash trees. And should the landowner choose to hire a contractor, to confirm that the contractor is registered and knowledgeable with the relevant local, state, and federal regulations. So that's another thing that it would allow. We'd also get an idea of how many ash trees are being treated, because we're sort of asking for them to stipulate, I'm removing this many, I'm treating this many. But there's no permit fee.
I have a question. When you say that you make that you're asking, suggesting that someone replant when they remove the ash tree, what happens if they do not follow the requirement that you're asking?
It's a suggestion. This is separate from...
So you don't go out and follow up and check up?
Oh, I try to. I mean, when I can. There's hundreds of requests. I mean, I don't...
There's no fining or charging?
This particular portion, this amendment about the ash trees, no. We're going to explain to them their options, try to let people understand how important it would be to try and preserve some if they can. Most people who are in love with their trees, they have some really nice trees on their property, and their property is more valuable, the real estate value is greater when you have mature, healthy trees on your property. Not every tree is a candidate for injection, so initially you could have 25 trees on your property, and maybe only 5 or 6 really would qualify as really good health overall. I mean, emerald ash borer aside, I mean, the ash trees are struggling like a lot of other trees are. So we're not saying, every tree is going to be a candidate for it. But there would be no, there's no penalty or it's going to get in trouble if they don't replant for the ash trees.
And you mentioned properly disposal. What is properly disposal of the ash tree?
Well, the whole state is under quarantine for ash, and you're not supposed to be moving firewood, you're not supposed to be relocating it elsewhere. I mean, I don't really know how they really can enforce that. I don't think the armed agents are at the border stopping you from going camping in Pennsylvania with firewood in your car, but they're trying to shoot for that. Basically, the whole state is under quarantine, so it doesn't really matter a whole lot because they've found it in enough places in the state that we've qualified as all quarantine. So initially, when they were trying to eradicate the insect, they felt that that was really strict with that, but they quickly realized that they couldn't eradicate it. It was just they were just trying to contain it, which we know since it came from Michigan so many years ago that hasn't been successful because it's such a voracious insect.
I also just wanted to add that, and Lisa, tell me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to add that the exceptions that currently exist in the ordinance, we've talked about trees that are in imminent danger, et cetera, in danger. The arborist still has to be notified about those. So this is not, it's an extraordinary exception. The arborist still is notified when someone wants to take a tree down that is diseased, dying, dead, an imminent threat. So this is not really unusual. This is another exception, basically.
Okay. Ms. Howard or Patrick, do you want to respond?
I actually just have a question for our attorney on this, which is usually when we've seen an ordinance with the word shall in it, it's not optional. And so I guess I'm asking the question, is the Section 2 of G, is it legally unambiguous that that's not enforceable, that goal?
The tree replacement goal.
Yeah. Because I read it as, if I'm taking down one ash tree, I'm going to have to put up another tree. If I'm taking down 10, I'm going to have to put up one. I didn't know that you had intended that as an optional goal. The language isn't particularly clear to a layperson. I don't know to an attorney and to a judge if it is, but...
So you're saying that it sounds like a contradiction to say shall and goal?
I read that as a mandate, that the goal was being interpreted, could be and reasonably would be interpreted as a mandate, and that's what I thought you intended. I didn't realize that. So that's my first question, is that clear? And if it's not, would you object to adjusting the language so that it's more clear that it's optional?
instead of goal, you might want to add or replace it with recommendation. There shall be a recommendation of 10% removed ash trees, but with a goal or with a recommendation of a minimum of 1 tree replanted per application. And then maybe you can actually say, but no, there shall not be a replacement requirement.
If you're
Not
satisfied with
exactly
that
in those
language,
words,
I
but
mean,
it might be good to just spell it out if that's
okay,
exactly what the intent is.
so that's, look, I think we're all trying to do what we can, both for the shade tree canopy and for the, the costs our residents are bearing. So I'd be very happy with something like that. The other question I have, though, is also for our arborists, just in terms of workload. This looks like a deluge in terms of workload for you, on top of the alarms you've already been sounding about increased applications, which maybe will go down as a result of the new ordinance, I'm not sure. But, so, with the, we don't really have a census for the ash trees on private property, but I would guess that it's significantly more than the public count, which is...
I couldn't guess. I mean, it's regional in the town. I mean, there are areas that don't have any, and then there are areas that
Right.
just fill with them. So I can't generalize. I really can't.
Right, but I guess the question on the permit requirement is, are you confident you can keep up with your...
Well, I'm trying now. I mean, I am using one of my crewmen who's been helping me do the checking things. We've extended it to 20 days, so that was important, and that was what that was at. That was why that was in there. Yeah, I'm going to try.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought this section was still 15. Am I misreading it?
I thought that we had talked about...
We had, and I was confused because I thought...
that was passed.
Maybe I misread that.
I hope it was.
It's 20 business days.
It just went fast. Otherwise, you're correct. It's not going to...
It's 20 business days.
Also, I think we wanted to introduce in the whereas, I don't know what you call that section, the whereas section, the preamble?
Preamble.
Yeah, that we just want to introduce the idea that a staged removal is better for everybody, including the homeowner. You know, you don't think so?
That's fine, I don't actually have a problem with that. I have no worries that whichever version we pass, they're going to come out tomorrow and take on all the...
Right, yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
People are going to be budgeting for this for years. Oh, I'm sorry. People are going to be budgeting for this for years, right? So I don't think we have any worry that all the ash trees are going to come down.
So that might also ease the load on the arborist, because they won't be all coming at once.
Well, there'll be a rush. I think we'll feel that, but...
Was there a recommended word change in the
Yes,
two?
Ms. Maddox, did you catch it? And do you have it?
I'm working on it. I'll get
Working on it, okay, sorry. Was there any other
1 minute.
discussion then, Ms. Butler?
I share Patrick's concern, and I'm just wondering whether there's a way that we can keep track of this inventory. If we're waiving the permitting fee, but we're still incurring a lot of municipal expense, having Lorraine go out and check on these. And I understand that we may occasionally catch someone taking down an elm, mistakenly thinking it's an ash, although aren't they going to have professionals? I mean, the size tree that requires a permit, it doesn't, then we're also trying to capture people in the Venn diagram who can take down the tree themselves, so it has to be large enough to need a permit, but then they're also taking it down themselves, and they happen to mistake the, it seems like it's a pretty small subset that we're catching, and I continue to be concerned, not that I don't think you're doing an excellent job, but at some point, this is going to be an overwhelming problem. And so I appreciate the goals of the Shade Tree Commission. I think we do want to keep track of the magnitude of the problem. We do want to continue to educate and encourage people to replace the canopy. I'm just wondering whether we have to do it by ordinance and whether this is the best mechanism to do this. I mean, ordinances aren't a good educational vehicle. Most people don't sit around reading their ordinances, even if they're taking down an ash tree. So, I just...
I agree. I agree with Councilwoman Butler, but the only problem is, as Janet had mentioned, all the other trees are done the same exact way, and I think we'll be setting precedent if we did something differently.
Well,
and that was my only issue. I agree with you.
This variety, though, we have a catastrophe, and I wonder whether there's something. So I guess we have to. Most people would have a professional cutting down the tree. I wonder whether there's...
Most people do. I mean, most people in town who are going to behave and who are going to follow the rules that we all have already, there are plenty of people out there who try to, and who accomplish what they want to do on the weekends when I'm not around, or no one's down in the office to answer the call when Mrs. Jones is calling to complain about something going on next door. So you'll always have that segment of the population that's going to break the rules, whether we have rules or not. So,
I wonder if we could electronically, though, have some sort of system where if you went online, theoretically, to just permit online or get permission online, but, like the airlines, you have to accept that you've looked at the, carry-on policy, and then you've looked at the, you have to agree that you've know the replacement, or that you've identified the tree, or before you get some sort of permit that you could print out at home.
I don't think everyone's online. I talk with a lot of seniors and people who don't even go online to see what the ordinance might say or even print out the application form already. I have a lot of people that come to the office and just get hard copy. I've even mailed blank hard copy. I carry them with me in the truck. I give them out to people. I think most people in town who are open and who are going to try and cooperate and follow the rules, they already know that we have a tree removal permit system existing before. Both the borough and the township had one, but different from each other. That got brought together at consolidation, and now this is just a couple steps to try and fine-tune it and make it a little bit more streamlined. The developers that I've been working with for the past year and a half, I mean, they're all kind of following right in line, and they're giving me the information that I'm asking for on the plans as part of the tree removal, tree replacement plan. It's a whole page in the actual set of plans that comes in. So I think that people have gotten the idea, they're understanding that there is a private tree ordinance in town, and if anything, this ash is not a big negative, it's a positive, because they are getting a break, and they don't have to abide by the new replacement quantities that go by the DBH of the trees. It's just, it's a piece of information that we're trying to keep track so that hopefully we don't wind up with clear-cut yards, but there is that possibility. It's out there.
I actually also wonder whether, and I can't say this is going to happen, but I think that if neighbors start to see lots of trees coming down, it might be less time-consuming for Lorraine to have the permits right in her office, where she can just check and instead of having to go out there, and she can just say...
Oh, well, that's what I do now. If I get a call that someone's reporting some cutting, first thing we do is we go to the file and check and see, is there a permit for that location? And then, does it sound like what's happening, what this lady's saying on the phone is happening, and what the permit, does it sound right? Okay, if not, then I go out there, I stop the job, I call the tree company, I have to call the homeowner, and that does become a time-consuming thing on everyone's end.
Ms. Howard, thank you. So that was where I was going to go, because it seems like I want to thank you guys for really taking this seriously, this charge to help figure this out, and it seems like this is administratively a very sensible way to do this. It's sensitive to your time, Lorraine, but it is building in appropriate safeguards to ensure that we have the tracking that we need, that we're not going to have sort of rogue incidents, which unfortunately they're not many, but when they happen, they're unfortunate, and they do happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know they do happen, right? And so this seems systematic in a way that is fair to homeowners, because it's not burdensome. It's similar to the current system they'd have to deal with anyway. So you're teaching people what our system is, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're right. If my neighbor started cutting down a bunch of trees, I'd be calling calling Access Princeton screaming, and so I think you've landed in a good place, and I'm sure Bernie will want to weigh in, but I want to thank you for thinking about this.
I'd like to comment on one other aspect of it, and that is, while the leaves are on the trees, it's relatively easy for the untrained eye to identify an ash tree by the formation of the leaves. When the leaves are off the trees, it takes a trained eye to identify the bark on an ash tree, because there are other species that look much like an ash tree. And a concern that has bothered me is that it, not deliberately, a homeowner or landowner, not deliberately, will be working on a stand of trees and simply assume that they're taking down an ash tree when they may be taking down something else. That is one concern that I have, and that when the leaves are off in another month, it's going to be pretty difficult to identify with certainty that you've got an ash tree rather than some other species. Secondly, there are some large ash trees on private property that, like large ash trees on municipal property, may be healthy and may be worth not cutting down at this time. May be worth trying to encourage the homeowner to treat the tree rather than to cut the tree down. And I think that only by having our arborists deal with the homeowner on a person-to-person basis is that going to happen. It's not going to happen if the homeowner says, okay, I'm going to take down my ash trees, and off it goes. So I think that there are good and logical reasons for the permitting. There are good and logical reasons for waiving the fee for the permit, and there are good and logical reasons for encouraging the homeowner to replace the ash trees that are taken down, but not requiring them, because the homeowner is going to be faced with the cost of taking the trees down, and replacing them is going to be another financial burden. And I just want to add a side comment to it, and that is that when we explored ways of ameliorating the cost impact of the emerald ash borer on homeowners, we found that there is virtually nothing that the municipality can do to lessen the cost burden on the individual homeowner other than waive the permit fee. We can't have the homeowner make a donation to the municipality for treating the tree, consider it a donation to the municipality, treating a tree on private property. We can't in any way impact the property assessment, because, believe it or not, I was told that landscaping is not considered when the property is valued for tax purposes. Mm-hmm. So all we can do is to waive the permit fee. And beyond that, try and encourage homeowners to save those ash trees that might be saved, that are still healthy, and might survive for a period of time, or might survive. After all, there are still elm trees in Princeton, even though we had an elm tree blight back in the 1970s that was going to wipe out all the elm trees. And I think that what is being proposed by the Shade Tree Commission is a reasonable and rational way of going about it.
Can I make a motion? I think that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, but we're still in the...
I think that Lisa is going to...
Yes.
The wording?
I think it would be prudent to eliminate concerns of ambiguity, to kind of reorder the language under G2 of the Shade Tree Commission's proposed ordinance as follows. There is no requirement for a permit application to include a tree replacement plan under Section 22-15 13D, comma, except that there is a recommended tree replacement goal of 10% of removed ash trees, comma, with a recommended goal of a minimum of 1 tree replanted per application. The replanted trees, in parentheses, if any, shall, if site conditions permit, be planted in the same or contiguous locations on the premises. So it's using the same language, but just essentially reordering things. And
Did you drop out the 10% though? Because I thought it was also, it was...
I think she left it in
Did you say it? Okay, I just didn't hear. All right, great.
so it's essentially reordering, taking out shall and putting is, so there's a little less confusion. But I think if you start with
It sounded fine with me. I don't know if everybody got it.
But you would be starting with
I got it.
the language that explicitly state there is no tree replacement requirement, except that there's this recommended goal.
Yeah,
I think then it's a little clearer to anyone reading.
Okay, well, it sounds like, I mean, we're still in the work session, and then, well, we have the streetscape design standards on the agenda before we get to the ordinance
Is
introductions.
there any problem with just,
Well, I think we have to amend the agenda
I move that we amend the agenda.
to put the ordinance introduction next. Okay. So amending the agenda, moved by Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Okay. And is there a motion to introduce did you want to introduce the shade tree version?
I make a motion that we introduce the shade tree version with the necessary corrections, the changes that our attorney had made.
And just to be clear for the record, that's 2016-40. Version is proposed by the Princeton Shade Tree Commission and ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning trees and shrubs, and specifically the infestation of the emerald ash borer, and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Is there any further discussion?
Yes. Did you want to say something? I just want to say, I appreciate the goals, and I don't disagree with anything. I appreciate that you've moved on this, that you want to waive the fee, that there's no replacement, or no replacement, it's just a goal. But we spend so much on technology, and this is an area where I think, I can't do it, but I think a solution should be found. You should be able to find a solution to this if we had the right pieces in place. I just don't think it's that difficult to be able to do this online. When you said you go to the file, I mean, I don't understand why this isn't online. To be able to keep this information online, when you said that you get a call, the first thing you do is go to the file to see if there's, it's just disappointing
This is
to me.
just, this whole management of this tree stuff is one task that's done by existing office staff, and we kind of, it's, we don't have an IT person in our office
I know
to
you don't.
sit there and set the whole thing up. I mean, we have an Excel spreadsheet. We can pull it up. We print it out. My coworkers update that for me, and they give it to me, so I have one in the field with me. We actually have an accordion file, alphabetical, filed by the name of the street. I mean, it's not by the person's name, it's by street name, so it's very easy to look it up. It does take a little bit of time, but basically you can refer to it pretty quickly. I'm not a computer whiz.
No, I'm not holding you in any way accountable for this. I'm just saying.
But all that technology just takes that much more support for there's a
right.
lot of other more important things I think that we need to keep track of in town. But technology, I think that it's a basic system. They filled out they're coming in, they're
I
dropping off.
appreciate that, Lorraine. I do, and I'm not holding you in any way accountable for this. I'm just saying, I think we need to,
Well, we could see, I mean, there's a lot of ordinances in a lot of different towns across the country. That maybe there's a template out there that we could do. I mean, we've been checking other communities to see how they've actually
Right.
handled emerald ash borer. Maybe we could dig a little deeper and see what they do for permitting, and if there is something that's, the wheel's already invented, maybe we could just...
great, because as sure as I'm sitting here, within a couple of years, I know that there's going to be a budget request for more help for the emerald ash borer, and part of it is going to be the administrative cost of taking care of this process we're setting in motion tonight?
On the
Simon?
on the municipal side, it's already in motion. There's already work to integrate into our capital plan the municipal cost of dealing with the Emerald Ash Borer. So this is simply whether it's also going to bleed into the operational effort and the staff time. The one thing that caught my eye, but I have not followed up on, is a few weeks ago in the New York Times there was an article about forestry. And one of the things they mentioned in passing in the article was forestry apps for people who are managing small commercial forests. So I don't know, but when we had this discussion a few weeks ago, we talked about maybe instead of you having to go out there and size the trees, so you can send in a picture and some app can tell you how big it is, so you're saved some effort. But I don't know if that exists or not, but it's probably the kind of thing that's worth checking out just to see if it exists, because if it doesn't exist today, it's a good bet it's going to exist in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years from now, the way things are moving. So.
Right. It would be nice to keep an open mind about the possibility that we could streamline this effort in some way, whether the Shade Tree Commission investigates it or whether our IT committee does it, but we ought to be able to do this.
I'm
But
ready
don't
to...
ask me how.
I know, I'm ready to vote. I'm ready to vote.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on October 24th, 2016. We just love seeing you every meeting.
Can I just comment that the number of Shade Tree people has been dwindling at these meetings? Is it, Janet, you get a prize, and Victoria.
I think we started with 75 people, and now we're like with 5.
And then, just while you're still here, we have on the agenda under resolutions, Student Recognition Award, and are any of the students here?
No, they're all college students there.
Okay, they are.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So then we'll keep with the order then. I was going to try to give them a little bit of a break, but, and move them up, but we'll...
Perhaps maybe in January, when they might be home on winter break, we could have a, I don't know if...
Yeah,
whatever,
definitely.
something,
Okay.
whatever.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much. All right,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you in the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to the next work session, which is the streetscape design standards for Nassau Street, and I'd like to welcome up Deanna Stockton and Jim Constantine. And just while they're getting set up, I think council has been kept up to date on this, but this is an initiative. There's been a group, including Councilwoman Butler, who I think just stepped out, and myself and Deanna, members of the Merchants Association, Princeton University, and Mr. DeShield have been meeting over the past several months. There was a big public meeting at the Garden Theater looking at Nassau Street. I'll turn it over to Jim.
I have a couple questions just before we begin. Is this identical to the report that's on the website, or is this a presentation?
This is an abbreviated presentation.
Okay, so I guess I have two requests. One, for the minutes, can we have the presentation itself, and also the current version of the report? And the reason I asked that is because the link that's actually in our agenda packet didn't work. I had to go find it on the website, which I know how to do. I don't know if the public knows how to do that, or if it's hanging off of a page I didn't find. Like, is it on the planning page or the engineering page?
It's on the front page of the website.
It's on the front page of the website. We had,
Okay, I didn't see it there. I don't know how I missed
unfortunately,
it.
we changed the document between when
Yes, I saw
put it
that.
in the agenda and when it was posted to the website. I'm sorry for that. But we will get Kathy the updated versions of both the document and the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. And we'll do it in a in a PDF, as I'm noticing that the PowerPoint fonts aren't equating, so there'll be a couple of words off. So anyway, this is a set of standards that really try to enhance the appearance, safety, and the pedestrian-friendly experience along Nassau Street, recognizing that there's a real cultural and historic significance to Princeton's Main Street. Or we can also say this is how we can create better public space on Nassau Street. So the number of standards or the items in the streetscape elements are shown on the screen here, and they're wide-ranging. I'm not going to try to touch on all of those tonight, but this is really establishing a palette of materials and a design vocabulary for those materials. It's not a plan, so it doesn't say specifically this should happen on this block. That would be something that would be done in implementation, block by block, and in some cases property by property once you adopt this. So this gave us a chance to, one, look at existing conditions, and we have some 30-year wear on our existing, or I guess last full streetscape improvements on the core blocks of Nassau Street. And there are issues related to the fact that they're a diagonal pattern, trying to replace sewer laterals. You end up getting the sort of checkerboarding effect that you see in the image on the left. We also know that some of the beautiful granite curbs that surround the tree wells that also flare with the diagonal have really started to be moved both by the tree roots and other wear and tear. And so there's lots of existing maintenance issues that can be reassessed at this time. It's also an opportunity to reflect on things that may have been taken for granted, existed for a long time, but have never been analyzed previously. For instance, the amount of space that's used on Nassau Street for the edges of tree wells, which really aren't benefiting the roots, or the areas for car doors to open, or where bicycles end up being parked in large spots. So it's a chance to sort of reassess these things, try to eliminate some conflicts. We've organized the streetscape into really two basic zones. One are the 16 feet and greater streetscapes, and you can see in the diagram there's an orange area, the throughway zone, that's really the primary pedestrian passage area, and then in green what we call the furnishing zone, which really consists of the street trees and tree wells, the street furniture, the ability that you'll see here, even for cafe seating. It's where benches have always existed. So if we look at one of the options that's actually was tested during the June, I think it was June 18th public open house, was the idea of turning seats 90 degrees, benches 90 degrees, and creating social groupings where benches can face one another. And this is sort of a tactical urbanism, real life, test it out, kick the tires, give us your feedback. And to be blunt, people love this arrangement, and we got a clear endorsement. You also experience the streetscape differently, because now you're sitting perpendicular to the street. You can see down the street. You can see architecture differently. I think it's very similar to the experience people had with the parklet demonstration when they experienced the whole street life in a different way. So this really certainly gave us a chance to make better public space with benches. And that actually becomes one of the standards that's in the package, not just turning two benches to their sides, but also the ability for three bench groupings. Obviously, it needs to be coordinated with areas for car doors to open. In many cases, it's actually easier if you look at the photo there. I mean, a car door can open and people can walk right between the benches, so you don't need to necessarily dedicate space only to that movement. The other thing that came out of our open house and sort of testing ideas was the opportunity to put dining or allow dining in a number of different ways. One is along the storefront where it's allowed today, but also allowing it to move into this furnishing zone for some of the same reasons that the benches can be turned. And if we look at this existing scene, looking down in front of Starbucks, you can actually see on the right behind the bench just how much excess space is totally dedicated for car doors to open and people to get in and out of cars. And so recapturing that, here is an after view where you can see, one, that the through movement zone is paved in one treatment, so that's the throughway zone, the primary path, and then the furnishing zone uses a slightly different textured paving so that it's actually differentiated visually and texturally. And this one actually illustrates both cafe seating along the storefront as well as along the curb, which the standards are suggesting is an option. There wasn't as overwhelming a public support directly for that, but there was a majority support to looking at both types of seating. So one of the opportunities by placing cafe seating in the furnishing zone is it can allow for more throughway traffic. We'll see that on the narrower streetscape or sidewalk conditions. So if we look at the actual pavement treatments that are recommended, one is, if I go back again just to the photo, in the through zone, a larger, first of all, going to a 90-degree geometry and using a paving stone, the London paver. They're typically about 1 foot by a foot and a half or 2 feet across. There's an example of them that you can find in different parts of Palmer Square, and then a finer grain brick-type paver in the furnishing zone to give it more texture and more detail. There are some cost implications with this. If we look at standard concrete, which is in the top bar here, if you do it at 90 degrees, which is not what Nassau Street in the downtown has, it's about $10 a square foot. As soon as you turn concrete into a 45-degree pattern, you're up to about $14 a square foot. The durability and maintenance, the life cycle of that is about 20 to 30 years. That's the range that you're in right now, and you can see what's happening on Nassau Street. There's places on Nassau Street where we have things that are probably decades beyond that, but you can see what happens with the wear. When you go to the pavers, the London pavers in the second line, you go to $19 a square foot, so it's about one-third more than the diagonal concrete poured-in-place paving, but the life cycle goes up to about 40 years, so you get an increased durability. The other thing that happens in terms of maintenance is you shouldn't get the checkerboarding that we get with the sewer lateral and water lateral and other infrastructure repairs and maintenance, because you can pick up paving stones, replace the line, put it back. What happens now is you start trying to re-pour a checkerboard pattern of the poured-in-place concrete, and you can never get the perfect match. And then it's a similar cost, just slightly higher with the brick pavers. So the long and the short is it's a more expensive material to install, but it lasts longer and it should maintain at a much higher level. And that's in fact why you see the university using it more and more on the walkways throughout the campus. Let's go to the less than 16-foot wide sidewalks. So again, we have in orange the throughway zone, in green the furnishing zone, and again, one of the recommendations is to actually consider moving cafe seating curbside within this zone, and that's probably easily seen here. And one of the things that we noted is that when you actually have some of the benches and trash receptacles in front of some of the eating establishments today, they often become sort of dominated by the patrons of the food establishment, and the benches really cease to be public benches, and it really becomes sort of seating related to the establishment. So if you were to apply that standard here, looking down towards CVS on a narrower section of the street, you see the through zone and its London pavers, you see the texture paved furnishing zone to the right, and you see the ability for cafe tables and then sort of moving benches to elsewhere in the streetscape. When you get into the narrower streetscape, you do have to have the benches typically parallel the curb as they do today. So it's an opportunity. You would have to look at some adjustments to your ordinance or your licensing agreement related to where folks are allowed to put cafe tables. But what happens if you look at that through zone, if you would imagine under the orange awning there, if somebody were to place tables in the storefront, you block some of that passageway, the pedestrian primary passageway in the through zone. So those are the trade-offs. We believe that in the narrower sections of the street, putting those cafe tables in the furnishing zone with an agreement for maintenance by the food establishment. This is not necessarily waiter service, but it's a way of trying to get them to maintain, which in many cases out on the benches and the trash receptacles, it's sort of a free-for-all situation today. One other thing that's shown in that simulation I just had up, is around that existing tree, you can see some cobblestones. And those are really intended as one of the alternate treatments for tree wells where you have larger existing trees. You can set them in. You don't want to, you want to be very sensitive to the root structure. And then further down the street, there are actually metal tree grates. And we, again, did some testing of this in the open house, had some feedback from the public. And so the standards represent both the ability to use the iron grate tree wells, which, by the way, you can walk on, you can sort of get more usability out of the public space from those. There's definitely a cost associated with those because they're about $800 to $1,450 per tree well, and you do cut them and basically allow the tree to grow over time, and you can cut rings out successfully and allow the tree to mature. So those are the two standards that are basically proposed that would work in terms of design vocabulary with the rest. Traffic signals, trying to look at ways to move towards the darkened or the black stanchions like you have actually occurring right now at Van Deventer, Washington, placed in place. Utility and electrical cabinets, also getting those to that black color. We were hoping to suggest moving street signs to a black color, although I think I'm going to be in a community tomorrow morning, and I will check because I'm pretty sure they do have black street signs along a state highway, but through some good research we found out that actually brown was the only color that we could use. Black was not permissible under the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. However, the basic idea is to move away from the highway design palette that we have as a state highway with the aluminum posts, the green signs, to try to do things that feel like they're more compatible with a Main Street design vocabulary. So it's part of the visual cues to make a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And how those can be applied in a composite, we have a simulation here at the Witherspoon intersection showing the standard for the ladder crosswalk. Now this is an extended ladder crosswalk made even wider, and it also shows the potential optional treatment of actually doing a intersection tattoo or a colorized pavement or surface treatment over the pavement within the intersection. So there's the condition today, and then here's the after view. So you can see, let's go back again, you can see what it is today. Part of this needs to be coordinated carefully with the handicap ramps, but the idea is to really, particularly on this crossing, to provide more pedestrian space. People tend to walk outside the crosswalks regularly, trying to accommodate that better, make it more visual for the drivers, what's happening, and also you see the black mast arms and the ability for banners, which were recently approved at Palmer Square, up on the street lights as well, which can help scale the space down a little better. Okay, moving to traffic and pedestrian signage. Again, the idea is to try to come up with or try to take the existing, consolidate the signage clutter and place it on a black pole that's using the same design vocabulary as the street lamps. And then we also introduced a way to accommodate some wayfinding. So again, if we look at the existing condition, you can see that signage clutter over on the right on different posts, different conditions, and here it is consolidated onto that single black pole. This also marries two things that we were asked to look at. One is Palmer Square has some recently approved new parking directional signage, and that is it there, the green P with the arrow, and we were also asked to look at the university's new wayfinding systems, which are very simple black placards attached to posts, and you see those there, which can, that sign says Library, Heinz Plaza, Arts Council. Just, it can be general landmarks. I know there's some interest as well from the merchants to try to, in some cases, provide some wayfinding for merchants. This is really just addressing landmarks in the downtown. Bicycles. We again got, during our public open house, huge support for bicycle corrals, and this really reinforces some of the transformation to a complete street with bicycle infrastructure that your bicycle master plan is attempting to do, and it also can recapture enormous amounts of sidewalk space that's right now just cluttered with bicycles up on it. It also reinforces for bicyclists, generally ride in the street, park in the corrals, and the corrals are obviously a standard. You see in the bottom there's something from the New York City DOT. They're rolling out in communities throughout the world as basically sort of a more ideal way to try to handle bicycle parking. They can be primarily directed to no parking locations like you see in the image above. And just to show you where that is, at John Street Alley. So if you look at the far corner, there is that bicycle corral placed down there. You can also add some colored surface treatment to it to make it stand out, suggest a couple of planters in addition to the typical stanchions. You can snowplow through there. Public Works has tested these. They'll make it through the plow test. And that's how they would take place. And there's lots of opportunities to do that, not just on Nassau, on side streets. There's one other thing we're illustrating here, which is what we call an alley treatment, and I'm just going to go back to the existing conditions. So at John Street, Bank Street, and Tulane Street, this is a condition which, well, one is, I think there's the highest number of pedestrian vehicle strikes on pedestrians at Tulane, which is sort of confounding at first because it's a very narrow crossing, but we believe that motorists, to get into that narrow aperture, tend to actually, some cases, drive a little fast crossing traffic to get in, because in most cases you would expect to have higher pedestrian safety with narrower crossings. So what this would do, if you watch the simulation, is it would continue the grade of the sidewalk across the opening at these conditions, and then use a tightly spaced cobblestone treatment, smooth finish. It is bikeable, which is important. We did hear that from some of the bicycle advocates. And it's very similar to what the university has installed with the speed ramp or the speed table at the Dinky station, where they have a texture paving on the ramp and the ability to sort of walk out flush from the sidewalk when you would cross to the new Arts Center. So that's what's proposed there, and there would be some sort of tactile and visual warning on the sidewalk that you're crossing a place that cars might go. Certainly going to slow vehicles when they're crossing this location, and I think this was recently even rolled out in a meeting with the Bank Street residents to some support. So last couple of items. There is a First Amendment right for these little newsstands to be out in the public space, but it is public space, and so we're suggesting that they be consolidated into integral cabinets. They do come with a price tag on them, and I know that there's some legal issues in terms of how you handle toggling them in, but certainly has been the situation used in many communities. And again, if we just go back, sort of the analysis of this is, your public space is basically being, taken over by these little rascals. So that's the solution. Those boxes can range $1,800 for a 4-box cabinet, $2,500 for a 6-box cabinet. Think about them over decades and the ability to recapture public space for the use of citizens. So there is an investment to control them and relocate them. And then lastly, we have a special condition in a few places at the kiosk, which you see pictured here, at the Garden Theater, and even between Sovereign Bank and the Bank of Princeton, where we have plazas that meet Nassau Street. And so one of the options that's shown is the ability for the street, the sidewalk paving to actually continue back into the plaza area, or to allow the plaza to come out to the sidewalk, however you want to see it. This one also shows the proposed bus shelter at this location. So it's a way that the sidewalk space basically can extend in and sort of use the plaza space in a more integral way. And so that's, again, an option that's contained in the standards. And that's it. Summary.
Thank you so much. I had a question, actually. This was something that came up in passing at one of the initial meetings, but you were talking about how some towns had taken essentially control back of their sidewalks from the state on state highways, and do you remember this conversation? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more, because one of the complications with Nassau Street is because it's a state highway, we have to go through the state with whatever we want to do. So how would something like that work, where we would retain more control over it, and does that impact if we want to try to get state funding to help with some of these improvements?
You can negotiate different jurisdictional arrangements. So that is actually in a New Jersey DOT publication that was produced by the Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers. And actually, as you went through, it was about how to deal with state highways that are main streets. And actually, local jurisdiction turned out to be one of the tools that was most used in the case studies in New Jersey of communities trying to deal with exactly. My sense from having helped another couple of communities on this is there's a range of latitude of negotiation that you can undertake with the state. So if you want to get them to keep those expensive pipes under the pavement, you can probably do that. And if you're willing to take on, this is what I've heard several of the Department of Transportation officials speak to, if you're willing to take the surface and you want to treat it differently and maintain it, then you've got the surface, and perhaps they'll keep the underlying infrastructure. But it appears that there's multiple negotiated arrangements in these kind of shared jurisdictional agreements.
Well, I think we have the added complication that we also have a historic district at the state level to deal with, right? This would be SHPO's jurisdiction as well, right? The Kings Highway?
But I would think that most of the other main streets might have similar issues. Right?
Yeah, I just don't see SHPO delegating back to local control, even if DOT does.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lieberman?
Yeah, thank you. Very nice presentation, and I love the enhancements. I wish that you could be like I Dream a Genie and just blink or something and have that happen. One item, the furnishings that are outside near the street where the furnishing lane where people could sit in their different tables and seats near the street. I was outside of Hoagie Haven this weekend, and it was kind of funny because their benches in front of them were full of people eating, I guess, chicken cheesesteaks and whatever else they were eating, souvlaki's, whatever they were eating. Whatever they were eating, And then, so 3 people went over to the Chinese restaurant next door and sat down on their furniture to eat their sandwiches. And they came out of the Chinese restaurant like, "Get out of here! This isn't your food, this isn't our food, this is their food. Get out of here." Not that, they shouldn't have done that, but I can see when you say that, will it be the furnishings that, if it happens, like who would be responsible, and whose jurisdiction will it be? I mean, who could sit there? I just can see a lot of, when I saw that problem, I'm like, oh my God, if it's not your food in front of your place, you have to move on. Is that an issue that you ever thought about coming up with? And the other issue, truck idling. A lot of times trucks will idle for periods of time on the sides of those streets that you mentioned, while they're unloading and loading, and I can see 20 minutes with diesel in your face might kind of kill you here.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just saying, those are just a few issues that throw out there at you.
Mr. Simon?
I also want to thank you for the work you've done, and the presentation's beautiful. The thing that's holding me back from getting enthusiastic about it is I don't know how to go from the presentation of design standards, which looks like a wish list, to a plan where I understand the cost, because it makes it, it's not going to be free, and I don't know whether to think of it in terms of, $300,000 or $3 million, or the sky's the limit, right? And that makes a big difference to me in terms of how enthusiastic I want to be about the plan. So how do we get from where we're at with the standards and the work you've done up to this point, and a plan that we can implement, and we can be confident we have some idea of the range of costs involved?
Well, it's a nice segue, because we are planning to come back to council at the next meeting with a grant application. There is a federal transportation alternatives grant program where they do provide funding for streetscape projects. And so we would be looking to submit an application. We haven't quite defined our limits yet, but it's definitely Van Dievender is one end of the project, and we may go all the way to Bayard Lane on the town side of Nassau Street. We've got great opportunities to re-envision the tree areas because we do have so many missing trees in that stretch. So we are putting together a cost estimate and information to go along with that grant that we can report on at the next meeting. Of course, there's the surfacing topics that we can estimate, but then there are other pieces that may be a point of discussion regarding the landscaping. Do we provide irrigation for the landscaping instead of having Public Works coming through with their water buffalo trucks and dumping a gallon of water on plantings every week? Or, if we are extending our green space, that also would lend itself more to providing irrigation. Just different topics like that would play into a cost of the project as we move through a design process. But we can definitely give you a range of costs depending on what improvements would be incorporated.
Anybody else? Ms. Butler?
Is this I know you've been to the Merchants Association with this, but is this the public presentation of this? This is it? I was under the impression there was going to be there were going to be multiple chances for input. The people who participated back in June, I think, were expecting something else besides this. Is that not happening?
We've gotten into a time crunch with this grant application, and I think we can definitely have another public meeting. We did attend the Merchants Association, gave a very, very brief overview of the streetscape project, provided them with the link to the design guidelines on the website. But we could definitely follow up with a public meeting to get a wider input from the general public.
I feel like we told people who participated that there would be kind of a presentation and a chance to see what the results were of the various surveys that we took.
Right. I think at this point, we probably would look to do it early next year. I think between the holidays, all the holidays coming up, it may be worthwhile to...
In the meantime, do we have a mailing list? Do we have a sign-up sheet? Because I remember people were signing up, and maybe to just send out a blast email to everybody with the link to the presentation from tonight, and also the fuller link that's on the website, so at least they can look at the pictures online.
We can do that,
and that can be done probably this week.
Two small detail items that just from other committees, et cetera. One is the brown background on the street signs. We've had some discussion on that, as Ms. Stockton knows, and we've encouraged historic preservation to look at adding the name of the historic district in some way into the sign. So just so you're aware of that, that's something the Public Works Committee has done. That's for the colleagues here to know as well. And if people are concerned about that or don't agree with it, I guess we should talk about it. But that's the feeling of the members of the Public Works Committee was that most members of the public are not going to know that a brown background simply means historic preservation or historic district, right? So, and we do want to be proud about our historic districts and announce them. So, some way to do that. So that's one. And the other was just very recently, probably after your report was written, the state turned down our application on that bus shelter. Yes, so the green roof, the SHPO turned it down, the Historic Preservation Organization. So we're sorting out what to do next, right? I mean, we haven't, or have you already worked through that? But that's, last I knew, we had withdrawn our application.
Right, correct. We have withdrawn the application. The staff at State Historic Preservation would not support a green roof on the bus shelter. They did not feel that it was in keeping with the historic district. So if we opt to move ahead with that, they indicated that the application would have to go to a regularly scheduled Historic Sites Council meeting, at which point there would be a full public hearing on whether or not it could be approved. And so at this point, I asked them to withdraw the application, and we would make a determination as to whether or not we wanted to move forward with the green roof or switch over to a standing seam type roof, which is what they recommend. There was also some question about the solar panel to provide the photovoltaic lighting in the shelter. And I've sent over follow-up photographs to the State Historic Office to get feedback on if that is also a concern or if it's more the green roof. So as I get more information together, I'll be working with LRK to see what our options are.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to second Mr. Simon's point about letting people know what historic district they're in, because in all the discussions about the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District, I think one of the more shocking things was this was our 20th historic district, and I think we could pull anybody off the street, and I don't think you'd find anybody who could name all 20. And it's just a shame, because I think people would love to know that they're standing in a historic district, and especially Nassau Street, where we have so many visitors. I think it just enhances the experience for everybody to know what the name of the historic district is and that you're in one. So, and then if I can be of any help with the, this keeps turning off, with the cool bus shelter.
The green bus shelter?
Yeah.
We will let you know.
We can be in touch later. Is there anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
No, I was going to say that Bob Kaiser is probably screaming in his retirement time off because he really wanted that bus shelter.
He did. We're going to get the bus shelter.
Yeah, I don't think they've turned down the concept of a bus shelter there. It's just whether or not it can have a green roof and maybe the photovoltaic cells, right?
Correct.
What's a green roof?
That was the point of the bus shelter, was for it to be souped up.
Unless you're waiting for the bus and it's
Well,
raining.
but even, I mean,
about that, actually.
no, I mean, there's, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we move on to the second ordinance introduction for this evening, which is 2016-41, an ordinance by Princeton accepting the donation of vacant real property located at 224 Cherry Valley Road and designated as Block 601, Lot 2 on the Princeton tax maps. Everything okay over there? Okay. We've discussed this already as a council. This is a donation of about a 2-acre piece of property on Cherry Valley Road along an area where we're actually looking to acquire some easements. So this would, among the other benefits, allow us not to have to purchase an easement. I don't know if there's any other questions or if somebody would like to introduce.
Is that the right donation? This one doesn't require an easement as a result of this donation?
I missed part of your question.
I'm sorry, I've got mints in my mouth. I thought this was the backside of a lot. Am I confusing two different properties?
You might be. This one, we're taking the whole, we're accepting the donation of the whole parcel. We need the front portion of it for the Cherry Valley Road widening, but the whole lot is vacant, and we're taking the entire thing as a donation.
But this is currently joined with another lot, and somebody's paying taxes on it today, right?
No, this is on Cherry Valley Road, adjacent to our open space, which is located at the corner of Cherry Hill and Cherry Valley. I think you're referring to the Cherry Hill properties.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to need a second.
I move that we introduce this ordinance.
Second?
So it's been moved by Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any further discussion or questions?
Can I have
Mr.
just
Simon?
a second to formulate a question? Thanks. This is 224 Cherry Valley Road. Have I got the right address? Okay. It is currently private property and on the tax rolls. Am I following that correctly?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Okay, and the ordinance is introduced with a vote of 4-1, and the public hearing will be on October 24th, 2016. Mr. Simon, did you want to put in the record why you're voting no?
Yeah, I think in terms of our open space dollars and also our tax assessments, this isn't a good use of our resources. Pardon? We don't have to buy that much of it. The cost, we've had the conversation with the attorney on the cost. It's not nearly the entire lot to buy the easement. So it's part of a set of lots. The total cost is much smaller than the entire value of this lot.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we come to our resolutions. The first is 16-283, which is student recognition for the volunteers that helped the Shade Tree Commission, updating the shade tree inventory. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we come to 16-284, award of contract to Global Environmental Products Incorporated through the Houston Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Agreement for a global sweeping four-wheel mechanical sweeper, Model M4, for use by the Department of Public Works in the amount of $260,304.70. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Howard. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion?
Just to confirm, this is already in our capital budget, correct? Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is 16-285, authorizing the termination of the contract known as the placement and removal of solid waste dumpsters with Future Sanitation Incorporated. Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, may I interrupt? I just want to update council before it votes on the resolution. The recommendation is still to terminate that contract at this time. I just wanted to alert the council that we are still trying to work out a couple of outstanding issues with Future Sanitation. There are a couple of invoices for work that's been completed under the original contract, as well as about 20 to 25 dumpsters. I believe Mr. Huff advised you at one of the earlier meetings last month that are being stored. It's waste that was picked up from Princeton, but it's still being stored at Future Sanitation's facilities because it doesn't have sufficient credit with Mercer County to properly dispose of the waste. So we're still trying to work with Future to ensure that waste is properly disposed of. And there is some money that is maybe owing to Future, but we still have to go through invoices and paperwork with Future. So we only have a little bit of that information right now. Just wanted to let you know that termination is still recommended because as of this week, the municipality will be receiving bids for a new long-term agreement for this for this same work. So it allows the municipality to move forward with the new contract. But I just wanted to let you know that in a month or two, you may get a couple of leftover issues from the contract that are they would be proper payments. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but I still think that termination is still the way to move at this point. Just wanted to let you know. No
Okay.
changes to the resolution, but just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Is there a
you.
motion to introduce?
I'll move.
Not introduced, to approve, moved by Mr. Simon
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 16-286, opposing Assembly Bill 3888 and Senate Bill 2212, prohibiting certain third-party property tax appeals. This was brought to our attention last week, or at our last meeting, and is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion? Ms. Butler?
Yes, I just think we should also make sure that our attorney on the Princeton University litigation is aware of it, people that we notify.
Okay, can we just add that to, I don't know if we need to change the resolution, but just a note to the clerk's office to have him be CC'd on it?
That's fine with me, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by a single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? And is there a motion to approve? So moved. Moved by Ms. Howard. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. My understanding is that there's a couple more closed session items, so is there a motion to move back into closed session? And is moved by Mr. Miller, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And,